Welcome to General Grand Council Presents. Tonight, we are going to be enlightened by Brother Matt Parker. His presentation is going to be Ego and the False Self. So without further ado, Matt, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Brother Steve, and I appreciate that. And brothers, thank you for everyone coming out tonight. I really appreciate that, and I hope what I have to say will resonate with you. This is a presentation I've been asked many times to share this presentation or provide the written presentation to lodges or to brothers. And truth is, I've never written down a word of it. Every time I give the presentation, it may vary a little bit here and there. There's nothing scripted, no slides. But it is about ego and the false self and how that relates to Masonry. So we all have an ego. We'll just start with that. That's built into us. God gave us an ego for a reason. It serves a purpose. But too often we allow the ego to take control. And how do we do that? That's the false self. You see, we go through life day to day wearing masks. The masks are not really who we are, it's the role that we are playing at any given time. So when I'm in my office doing my job, I've got that face on. When I'm around my brothers in lodge, I've got that face on. When I'm with my family, it's a different face. It's always a different face. But none of those faces are the true self. That is how we are conditioned to behave, how we're expected to act. And it's a part that we're playing. There are really only two times in our lives when we are actually our true self. The first is when we're asleep, because think about it, you can't lie to yourself in your sleep. And the second time is a time called the hypnagogic phase. The hypnagogic phase is that little window in between being asleep and awake, where you're semi-conscious, but you're not really aware of the world around you. You're not functioning with the conscious mind at that point. So it's a little window there. We're all familiar with that. Sometimes we have lucid dreaming in that time period. But you can also enter the hypnagogic state through meditation or contemplation. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. I can assure you that it's nothing strange out there. I'm not telling you to get a yoga mat and sit cross-legged and chant Om. That's not what I mean when I talk about meditation. So again, we'll talk about that a little later. But it really all starts with our entered apprentice degree. The entered apprentice degree sets the stage for understanding the ego and how we are supposed to deal with that. Unfortunately, it's just so easily overlooked. When we are divested of all minerals and metals before we enter the lodge room, what does that mean? Why do we leave that behind? Why do we, in most lodges anyway, we leave our street clothes, what we walked into the building with, in the preparation room and put on some old pajamas or garments? Why? What does that symbolize? Oh, sure, you hear brothers say, oh, that's to symbolize that you're poor and destitute. I mean, that sounds all nice and flowery, but that's not what it really means. That's never what it was intended to mean. You see, the minerals and metals, your watches, rings, earrings, piercings, or whatever you have, your street clothes, all of that represent your attachment to the material world. And those are the things that tend to control us on a day-to-day basis, whether it be our jobs, investments, homes, vehicles, families, all of these things in the material world that consume us during the day. And a lot of times, it affects us at night. We just can't sleep because we're worrying about these things. And so what's happened? Those things are controlling us. We're not in control of them. And we're all guilty of that. That happens to every one of us. But Masonry offers clues as to being able to control that. And that begins with setting aside the minerals and metals. And that entered apprentice degree, when you take that step into the lodge room for the first time, being conducted in, you are taking a step into a sacred space. It is separate and apart from the material world. So the things of the material world, the minerals and metals, have no place in that sacred space. That's also the ego that we're leaving outside. All of our concerns, everything that we think we are, everything that we are concerned about on a daily basis, everything that we have to deal with, that has no place in the lodge room. It needs to be left outside. That's actually why it's one of my pet peeves when I see a brother pull out a cell phone in lodge, start checking text or social media. Again, there's no place for that in the lodge room, because the sacred space, that tiled space, is meant to be a retreat from that material world. It's a place where you center yourself and where you can focus on the true self. And we'll really talk about maybe what the definition of true self is shortly. But we all go through these cycles every day. One mask, then another mask, then another mask. And think about it. During our waking conscious day, we lie to ourselves all day long. We just do, positive and negative. We've all known men or women or people in general who have a sense of entitlement or think they are the best looking person in the room. We can't all be as good looking as Andy Adams, honestly, let's just face it. But we all know these people that have this overinflated sense of self-worth, right? It can also work the opposite way. We all know people who talk negatively to themselves. They're always feeding themselves negative input. I'm not good enough. I can't do that. That's not within my grasp. That's also the ego working against us. That's that false self whispering things to us. So the trick is to listen to the true self, get in touch with the true self. So we talked about the entered apprentice degree, being able to divest ourselves of all the minerals and metals. We take that first step into the sacred space. But then in the fellowcraft degree, we go through a flight of winding stairs. Unless you're a Pennsylvania Mason, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But the flight of winding stairs consisting of 3, 5, and 7 steps, the outer and inner porch, the middle chamber of King Solomon's temple. What is all of that telling us? What is that leading to? I mean, sure, we can tie that to the 5 orders of architecture, the pillars, the 7 liberal arts, and that's all great. That's important stuff. But what's it really symbolizing? It's symbolizing that journey to try to find the true self, the inner self. I like to think of that as the divinity within us. It's that spark of God, that spark of creation, divinity that's in each and every one of us. That is the true self. And it will never, never steer you wrong. But it's easier to listen to the false self. It's easier to listen to the masks that we wear every day because we are so convinced that that's who we are. So if I were to go through each and every one of you and say, okay, who are you? You could tell me your name, your occupation. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a employer, employee, whatever the case may be. And those are all things that describe an attribute of us. That's not who we are. So I'll submit this to you. When we talk about the lost word, what is the lost word? And we say that's the name of God, the name of deity. But if we take it a step further and realize that deity is within each and every one of us, God resides within us, then it takes on a whole new meaning. The lost word is the true self. And we're all Royal Arch Masons here, so I'll even tie that to the Royal Arch. As we go deeper and deeper from one arch to the next, we're getting closer and closer and closer until we finally reach that ultimate goal, the discovery of the true self. In the Fellowcraft degree, we arrive at the altar in the lodge room, and we say that we have arrived at the middle chamber of King Solomon's temple, not the inner chamber, not the Sanctum Sanctorum, the middle chamber. Have you ever noticed that in our degrees, we never arrive at the inner chamber? Has that ever struck anyone as being strange? I think there's a reason for that. When we are in the middle chamber, symbolically, we are looking towards the east. We are peering into the Holy of Holies. So tying this all to the building of the Temple of Solomon. In the temple, what divided the middle chamber from the inner chamber, the Sanctum Sanctorum? It was just a veil, right? A veil that we believe was woven by Hiram Abiff. So as we spend more and more time in that middle chamber, we're peering through that veil and we see glimpses of the true self. And the more time we stand there, the more time we spend there in that contemplative state or that meditative state or in touch with the true self, we see those bits and pieces and we start to see the bigger picture of who we are. Now, that's a lifelong journey. And I think that's the reason why in our degrees, we never arrive at the inner chamber, because that is a lifelong journey. We're all Master Masons. But how many of us have mastered the inner apprentice degree? How many of us have mastered the Fellowcraft degree? We spend more of our waking lives in the realm of the inner apprentice than we ever do Master Mason. The Master Mason is what we aspire to be. But that's not where we spend most of our time. We spend most of our time running up and down the flight of winding stairs and on the outer porch. Occasionally, we'll step into the middle chamber and we'll see glimpses of the inner chamber. Eastern philosophy talks about the search for enlightenment. And we think about the guru sitting on the top of a mountain, snow-covered mountain, and then there's a 6-foot radius of green grass around it because he's so enlightened, right? And sometimes we think that's where we want to be. We want to get to that point. Well, we're not really going to get to that point until we lay down our working tools. But we can catch glimpses of that. We can piece that together and we can get in touch with that true self. So the ego is a tool that we all use. Think of the ego as your apprentice. You are the Master Mason. The ego is your apprentice. So it's okay. It's okay for the ego to be with you. It's okay to use the ego, but the ego cannot be left unsupervised. So taking that analogy of the ego being your apprentice, if you give your working tools to your apprentice and just walk away, just assuming, oh, everything's going to be fine, what's worse can happen? How well do you think your project, whether it be a column or an ashlar or whatever the case may be, how well do you think that's going to be done? It needs that guidance. You can't let go of the reins. And we all do that. We jump to conclusions, we get angry for the wrong reasons, and all because the ego tells us we're justified in that. Let's look at the two columns. What does that represent? We have the two columns of King Solomon's temple. You also have another symbol, the circumpunct, the point within the circle that's bordered by two parallel lines. We really don't go into detail about what that means. It's just, here they are. Make up your own mind. But I really think they represent extremes. You have one extreme, you have another. And we, whether we like it or not, we're living in a time where the extremes are so stark. And just when we think we know where one extreme is, someone moves that goalpost, right? And so people now, they will cling to their one extreme. And they don't want to hear anyone else's opinion or thoughts because it may conflict with their beliefs. Right or wrong, it's going to conflict with their beliefs, so they don't want to hear you. And oftentimes they'll do whatever they can to shut you down so that they don't have to hear your thoughts or your opinions. And brothers, the answer is never at one extreme or the other. It's somewhere in between. And that's where we need to navigate. So we need to think of the pillars or think of the parallel lines as those extremes and not cling to one extreme or the other. Because when we do that, we are excluding a world of other ideas and thoughts. That doesn't mean we have to believe or agree with everything that comes before us, but we're wiser and we're better for at least listening and experiencing that, and then considering that. The ego often tells you, don't consider that, that person's wrong. The true self says, you know what? Just listen. Think about it. How does this apply to you? And then determine whether you think that is right or not. I mentioned that we all have working tools that we use. And the analogy I'm about to give you could apply to any of the working tools of masonry. I mean, heck, it could apply to this paper clip right here. But our most recognized tool in masonry is the gavel, right? So I always keep a gavel near me. I have this one here in my home office. I have another gavel on my desk at my work office. Always have a gavel near me. And the reason why is I was sitting here one day holding this gavel, just kind of meditating on the gavel. You know, what does the gavel really mean? What does it represent? Why do we wield a gavel in lodge? And, you know, I mentioned we get to the hypnagogic state. It's that state where the true self is really coming through. The ego is shut down. Our conscious mind is not speaking to us in that moment. We're just in that zone, so to speak. And so I'm staring at this gavel, then I realized we refer to our tools, working tools in masonry, of being these instruments of creating beauty. At no time do they ever tell you that this same gavel that can help to form the perfect stone, the perfect ashlar, that same gavel could also destroy that perfect ashlar. Could split it right in half. So that's what happens when we use our internal working tools. If we hand off our working tools to the ego, that's what's going to happen. It's going to cause chaos, destruction, even though that's not your intent. So we have to be careful how we wield our internal gavel, because we may have the best of intentions, but if we are not prudent, if we're not judicious in the way we use our working tools, we will hurt other people. We'll destroy relationships. We can create a lot of damage with our working tools. Same thing could apply to the level, to the square, to the plumb, the compasses. If they're not used right, you are not going to create that perfection and beauty that you were looking for. And we're all trying to build that temple. So we were talking about the Temple of Solomon earlier, the inner chamber, the middle chamber, inner chamber, Sanctum Sanctorum. But the Temple of Solomon is also a metaphor. So we say that each lodge represents the Temple of Solomon. We also say that we are the lodge. It represents the internal lodge. So therefore, the Temple of Solomon, we can apply to ourselves. If you're building your temple, do you want uneven stones or rough stones? Do you want your workers, your fellow craft, to misuse the square or the plumb? What's going to happen? Is that temple going to be stable? It's going to collapse. It's going to be uneven. And we can't allow that to happen, because we are, throughout our lifetimes, working on our own temple. I think one of the other things in masonry that we tend to overlook is we always talk about the perfect ashlar. Singular, the perfect ashlar. And I think that's wrong. I really do. We should be talking about ashlars plural. No temple is built out of one stone. It's thousands, thousands of stones. So when we talk about perfecting our perfect ashlar, we have a lot of ashlars to work on. So maybe you want to quit smoking. That's one ashlar. Maybe you want to lose weight. That's another ashlar. Maybe you want to be a better husband. That's one ashlar. You want to be a better employee. That's one ashlar. You want to be a better fisherman. That's an ashlar. Those are all things that we work on. We want to shape those. We want to hew those stones so they fit perfectly into our temple. The temple is the all-encompassing true self. So if we want to experience the true self, if we want to, get to that place, we have to work on a lot of different ashlars. We can't just pick one thing and say, okay, I have finished that one ashlar, I'm done. It doesn't work that way. No temple is built with one stone. It just doesn't happen. I talked about the two times where we are our true selves: when we are asleep or in that hypnagogic state. And by the time this presentation's all over with, you're all going to be walking around saying hypnagogic. You're going to try to work that into a conversation. I just know it. And I hope you do. Why do we go down the road with our radio blaring, the windows down? Why do we do that? Why do we keep the television on in the background? Just background noise. We're not really paying attention. We're in the office, we have the radio on. We're not really paying attention. But why do we do that? Why do we have to have that background sound? When I'm going down I-40 at 80 miles an hour, blasting my radio with the window down, I just assume it's because everybody on the road wants to hear Billy Joel as much as I do. But could it be this? Could it be that we're afraid to be alone with our own thoughts? It's scary to be alone with your own thoughts, because that's when you have realizations. And yes, Danny, we do all love Uptown Girl. You're absolutely right. We're afraid to be with our own thoughts because that's where truths are revealed. That's when we are forced to confront things that we don't want to think about. It's almost schizophrenic in a way. Schizophrenia is the detachment from the real world or from reality. And we all do that. That's what the false self tells us. That's what the masks tell us. But we look at our degrees. And I think really of any degree in Masonry, I don't think any degree illustrates that better than the Royal Arch degree, frankly. It is that journey inward, step after step. It is that search for the lost word. And the lost word is the true self, that divinity within us. And that's the reason why I say, if you listen to the true self, it'll never steer you wrong, because that is that element of God within each and every one of us. We just have to quiet our minds. And so I talked to you about meditation at the beginning. And so let's talk about that just a little bit. I'm not going to get too deep into it. One thing that I like to do in a lodge that I used to be a member of, one thing that we would do is start each meeting with about a 5-minute period, 3 to 5 minute period of just quiet contemplation. Often we would have a little soft music in the background, or maybe use a Tibetan singing bowl, if anybody is familiar with these. But just to give a little resonance there, sound, but really it was to center ourselves before we jumped into the lodge meeting. It was a time for us to purge ourselves of all those vices and superfluities, the minerals and metals, so to speak, that we should be leaving outside of the lodge room. We should be doing that ourselves on a daily basis. Take 10 minutes out of your day just to engage in thought. That's really all meditation is. If you're driving down the road, turn the radio off and just think. That is meditation. Some people like to sit in a quiet room and burn a little incense, things of that nature, and that's all well and good. I've done that a few times myself. I enjoy that. But my meditation is a cigar and a glass of scotch. And I just think. Sometimes I'll even get a journal out and start jotting down some of my notes, because I may realize something profound that I never thought about before. Kind of like when I was talking about the gavel being used as an instrument of destruction. You better believe I had to journal that so I would not forget that. That's all meditation is. So don't be afraid of meditation. I just think everyone should utilize that. You can read Brother Chuck Dunning's book, Contemplative Masonry, where he really puts that into a practical approach. So I highly recommend that to anyone. But Masonry does provide a path. It's not a religion, but it is very spiritual. When we realize that the true self, the lost word, is within us and has always been within us, then our lives really can change. Our relationships can change. The way we see other people, the world around us, will change. And we all know people who are content just to go through life the way they are. Sometimes unfulfilled, unhappy. but they don't want to take any steps to improve their situation. They don't want to engage in contemplation or thought. They don't want to enlighten themselves. The 7 liberal arts and the fellowcraft degree really point us in that direction. We are to ever increase in knowledge. Read books, watch a documentary, just learn as you go, because by experiencing these new ideas and even having conversations with other people who may have differing views, by doing that, we learn things about the world around us, and thereby we learn things about ourselves that maybe we haven't realized before. And I'll tell you that, sometimes when you engage in that meditation and contemplation, you will realize things about yourself you've never noticed, you've never been aware of. Maybe other people see it, but the ego has prevented you from seeing it. And sometimes those things are not pretty. But it's only when you take that time to really think and engage that you connect with those elements of the true self. And you realize, there's this aspect of me that I don't like. I'm just a jerk. We all are. It's okay. That's human nature. But the road to enlightenment is understanding that we are human. We are going to make mistakes. But we can't fall into the trap of listening to the masks. We can't fall into the trap of letting our ego dictate to us what is right and our path that we should follow. We have to be in control of the ego. We have to tell the ego what to do. And so Masonry, again, when you break down our degrees, it really does point us towards finding the lost word, finding the divinity within ourselves. And see, when I give this presentation to craft lodges, I really can't talk too much about the Royal Arch degree. For brothers who have not been through the Royal Arch degree, I don't think they'd really understand. But I think that is one of the deepest, most esoteric degrees I've ever seen, bar none. That search for the lost word is our journey that we go through. I don't know how many of you here have heard of Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell wrote several books, but his most famous book was called Hero with a Thousand Faces. And what Campbell did, in fact, I've got a copy of it right here, and you can see I've got it all marked in here. What Campbell did was took hero legends from history, whether it be the Greeks, Romans, wherever, compared all these cultural stories and realized that they're all pretty much the same story. They're all telling the same thing, whether you're reading the Iliad or a Superman comic. It's a story that's ingrained in us. And just to summarize what Campbell wrote, think of it like a clock. Your hero starts out at noon. He's an ordinary person in his ordinary world, going about his ordinary life. And about 1 o'clock, he's called to a greater action, something bigger than himself, something that he needs to resolve. And he goes around that clock and he meets someone, or maybe several people, who aid him and provide knowledge or the tools that he needs to accomplish his goal. And he goes around, then you get to 6 o'clock down at the bottom. Campbell refers to that as the abyss. That's where the hero is defeated. That's where Superman gets hit with kryptonite, right? Look at any superhero movie. That's the best way to look at that. Or Star Wars is a great example of that hero's journey. It looks like the hero is defeated. There's no way he's going to come back from that. But he does. He finds a way, and he's stronger because of that. So we move on around the clock, 9 o'clock. He confronts his enemy, confronts the villain, confronts whatever it is that is the challenge, and defeats it because he's become stronger because of what he's been through. Move up around to about 10 o'clock. The reward. He's rewarded for what he's accomplished. Then you move back around to 12 o'clock. Back to the ordinary world he came from. And the world around him, the world that he returned to, has not changed. But he has changed. He'll never be the same person. He'll never go back to who he was before. Think about that in the context of our degrees. Our degrees also symbolizing birth, youth, middle age, death, and then rebirth. What happens in our third degree? It's that defeat, actually being slain within the rebirth, the renewal. When we are raised to the sublime degree of Master Masons, we're no longer the same person as we were when we first knocked at that door. We've just experienced that hero's journey that Campbell talked about. And that hero's journey, that reward that we see, that reward that we get after we vanquish our enemy, that's that glimpse of the true self. That's that inner sanctum sanctorum within ourselves. And that's what we should all strive to find. That's what we should be looking for. So think about that as you go through your day. Are the decisions you make made by the true self, or is that the false self? Is that the mask that you're wearing speaking? Is that the ego trying to tell you what you should do and where you should go and whatever? Where is that coming from? As far as Masonically, in our degrees, whether it be the Craft Lodge degrees or the York Rite degrees, or especially the degrees of the chapter and the council, they're really deep, deep philosophical ideas there, but they're all pointing towards that search for the true self. It's all telling us that material world around us is not the most important thing. Yes, we need to be concerned with that. We need to be concerned with our investments. We need to be concerned with our homes and families and jobs. I'm not saying to give up everything you have and go live in the wilderness as a hermit and eat crickets for the rest of your life. What I'm saying is, don't let those things control you. Don't make the mistake of assuming that these things are who you are. We say that the lost word is ineffable. And I said that the lost word is that divinity within ourselves. I think the lost word is the true self. So I will say this: I don't think that it's ineffable. Ineffable means what? It means unknowable. I think we can get to know the true self. Now, can it be put into words? No. I could describe myself. I'm 6 foot, blonde hair, extremely handsome. That's fine. You know, I'm a homeowner. I'm an employee. All these things I can describe elements myself, but can I ever put into words who I am, who the true self is? No. Any of you who have been to the House of the Temple in DC have seen the Tyler's chair outside of the lodge room. What's engraved on the back of the Tyler's chair? It says, know thyself. In Hamlet, Shakespeare wrote, to thine own self be true. Same thing. When we hear the words, whence came you? Those words now take on a different meaning. It's saying, who are you? Who are you really? It's a journey. It really is. As Master Masons, we need to realize that. We spend so much of our time in that entered apprentice realm, and we dip our toes into the fellowcraft realm, or just glimpse at the Master Mason realm. But we're all really entered apprentice. We aspire to be fellowcraft and Master Masons, and sometimes we hit it, but most of the time we're not there. And so I'll just leave you with this. Engage in just 10 minutes of quiet thought every day. I don't care if it's just driving down the road, driving to your office or your work. I don't care if it's just, sitting in a quiet room in your home. Just spend 10 minutes getting to know yourself. And you might be surprised who you think you are may not be exactly who you think you are, but I guarantee you this, you will like who you find out you are. You will like the true self. And once you're introduced to the true self, I guarantee you'll spend a lot more time talking to him. So I'll end it there. Brother Stephen, I will turn it back over to you, and I'm happy to take any questions, comments, threats.
Actually, Matt, if you will indulge me for just a minute, thank you and outstanding. And now I'm going to put the entire meeting on hold and stop the recording and then start it back up. And then we will be able to have the separation, which makes it easier. Wow. And Danny, would you please invite everybody to unmute and take part in the conversation?
Done. Everybody is able to unmute now, and you can all participate, and we will have a discussion. If you would please keep your questions cordially and ask our noble companion and Sir Knight, Brother Matthew Parker, questions. It's a great time to ask him. He did a wonderful job, and I'd love to have you guys ask some great questions. I learned a lot. So the floor is yours. Ask him any question you'd like.
I would like to make a comment.
Yeah.
Listen to the invitation. One of my raw arts papers, I ended it with, yesterday I was that I was. Today I am that I am. Tomorrow I will be what God makes me. I considered myself a lifetime apprentice because every day I learn something new. To me, my fellowcraft degree comes at death when I die and become judged by God. If I am found worthy, then I'll be raised from a dead level to a spiritual perpendicular. And I think we forget about that Masonry is not about the external, but the internal. And most Masons have no idea what the internal is.
I think that's a great observation, and I'll throw this out there. When a pharaoh died in ancient Egypt, there was a ceremony that they went through. His body was laid in the middle of the mortuary temple. The Pharaoh, his successor, would spend the night in the temple with the body, sleeping next to the body. And the idea was during the night, the new Pharaoh would escort the soul of the deceased Pharaoh across the Duat, and that's what they referred to as the Milky Way or night sky, to the afterlife or to the belt of Orion. That was that hero's journey. The new Pharaoh is dying to who he was before, and the next morning, so to speak, is a new person. He's discovered a new self. Also, interestingly, the new Pharaoh is then conducted about the temple, and the temple is lined with his court, his servants, his advisors. The temple represents the entirety of Egypt. And so the circumambulation around that temple represents the Pharaoh surveying all of Egypt, his land. So then we look at that as what we do as Masons when we circumambulate our candidates around the lodge. When we have the death of Hiram Abiff and the rebirth. Yeah, the Egyptians were doing it 5,000 years ago. Same thing. So, yeah, Brother Byron, great observation.
Was everybody gonna be quiet?
Well,
I can make a question.
Okay.
Massimo Del Grande, Illustrious Master Alhambra Council number 25 in Los Angeles, California. As you see, my outfit is very hot today, probably 86, and I'm close to the ocean, so it's also humid. Anyway, thank you very much. It was a great presentation, and I found myself aligned in everything you said, and I really appreciate that. My question is, I believe is not a common achievement reach the true self. So did you notice in your experience a common characteristic in the fraternity, in the lodge, Blue Lodge, York Rite, Scottish Rite, that that characteristic that you observe in another brother tell you he may close or he may reach that status?
No. And here's the reason why I said no. And I wanted to think about that and make sure I'm giving you an honest answer. I do not believe that that is something that we can achieve in our lifetime. I believe that that is a goal that we work towards, and we can get closer and closer. So in other words, we're peering through that veil into the inner chamber, into the sanctum sanctorum. We're seeing pieces of our true selves, and we're starting to piece together an image of who the true self is. But we're never going to see that big picture. We're never going to arrive at that destination until the day that we lay down our working tools and meet our maker. And at that time, we'll say, oh, this is who I am. I don't know if that answers your question or not, if they help. But I have found, I meet some brothers who are more in tune with that than others. A few of them are on here with me right now. Brothers here in North Carolina that I love dearly, and they are aware of that. And they are really, in a way, they're my mentors. I've learned so much from them.
So sorry, go ahead.
Well, all I was going to say is the reason why I learned so much from them, the reason why I resonate with them and I think of them as my mentors is because it was the true self that I was resonating with, their true self that I was resonating with, not some mask, not some false ego that's being projected.
Yeah, actually, you answered my question, and I thank you very much. You mentioned a word that, to me, change the perspective. You said tune. So when you are tuned with the venerable institution we are part of, with the fraternity, I may be wrong, but when I see someone tuned, someone that is serving, to me, is if it's not close, if it's not already there, from my perspective, is going in the right direction.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Michael Williams had his hand up. Michael Williams had his hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment, but when this discussion made me think of two different things: the Temple of Delphi, what is it? Homo nocete ipsum, man know thyself, and also Dante's Inferno. So it's showing two sides of the spectrum of trying to know yourself. When I was listening to this lecture, and it hit home and resonated with a lot of things. Like my meditative practices and reading, and just finding the right time to get to know yourself and do things like that. I greatly appreciate this presentation today, and I just want to say thanks again.
Oh, thank you, brother. I appreciate the comment. Thank you. I see that Brother McIntosh, you have your hand up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thanks for a wonderful presentation. I just wanted to add to what you said a few moments ago, that the Bible made it very clear that we see in part, but when he shall appear, we shall be like him.
Mhm.
So in looking at my own personal life, developing as a kid coming up, there are certain realities that I see today as a 41-year-old. I didn't know it or realize it as a teenager. And as I engage more with well-informed brothers, a new world has opened for me. And I have been able to use these new insight, better apply my Masonic tools to further improve myself. So this was beautiful, and I just thank you for such a wonderful presentation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Byron?
I think one of the things that you didn't touch on, as you become more in tune with yourself, you become more out of tune with the majority of the people around you. You know, it's only that select few that's gonna resonate with you. And that was one of the hard things I had to learn about making my circle smaller and dealing with people that was closer to in tune with themselves or wanting to be in tune with themselves, where I could get them some kind of guidance. Because the majority of people flat do not understand.
I agree and disagree. And I'll explain. Yes, I agree. The more in tune you become with yourself or with the true self, the more you're able to separate yourself from where other people are on their journey. And you have to remember, it's important that we don't judge anyone else for where they are on their path, because that's their path. That's their journey. And they may not be where we are, but we have no right to judge them for where they are. That's their path. But I think as we become more in tune with the true self, and we're able to set aside the ego, it's not so much that we get further away from these other people and these other thoughts. I think we actually understand them better. And so in a way, maybe they're resonating with us more. We're able to absorb that and deal with that, internalize that in a completely different way. And that way we can take the best of what other people have and learn from that. We can also see the worst in other people, and we can learn from that. Has anybody ever thought about using someone else as a mirror of yourself? I know it sounds really weird, right? And I don't mean that in a stalker way. I mean, I guess it could be taken that way, but
Teachers do that all the time, actually, to improve. I'm a teacher, so we do that
Yeah.
all the time to improve our teaching skills. So it's a very
Absolutely.
good tool.
I have a young man that's living with me, renting a room from me. He was homeless for 6 years. I helped him get a job, trying to help him get on his feet. And I've known him for a little over a year and a half. And he is absolutely a mirror. That I see elements of myself within him every day. And I see so many similarities. And that also helps me see flaws that I have within myself because I see them in him or other people, and not just him, but other people. And when I'm in tune with the true self and I see that in other people, that helps me to be a better person. It helps me to resonate with the world around me and have a better understanding there.
Hey, Matt,
Hey,
does the Johari window ring any bells with you?
I have heard that, but I can't place my finger on where or what that is right at the moment.
Well, interestingly enough, it basically states that you have four things that you have four aspects or perspectives that you're always going to have. You have that which you see and others see, that which you see and others don't see,
Mhm.
that which others see and you don't see, and that which no one sees. And the interesting kind of where a lot of what you have said tonight makes a lot of sense is that's actually a paper. I came across this question. Why does masonry make good men better? Well, when you have a fundamental trust based upon experience and you're exposed to different ideas that you haven't seen, some of those things are exposed. The Johari window would be what I would say, not a mirror necessarily, but a way of seeing things that you wouldn't have normally perceived.
I like that. I'm gonna have to look more into that. Like I said, I've heard that before, or heard the term, but I've never really explored that so much. But it is something I'd like to look more into. That's interesting. In fact, you were mentioning something. I mentioned Billy Joel earlier, and someone put in the chat that everyone loves Uptown Girl. But there's actually a reason why I used Billy Joel specifically there. Billy Joel had a hit song back in 73 or 74, 73, I believe, called The Stranger. Has anyone heard that song? The opening line is, and I may get it wrong, but we all have a face that we hide away forever, and we take it out and show ourselves when no one else is around. And the song is about the masks that we wear, the stranger. That's not the true self. That's the mask that we wear. If you really listen to the lyrics of that song, it's really deep philosophical song. It sounds like a great, 70s rock song, but there's some, really hidden gems in there. And so I think about that song when I'm giving this presentation, or when I talk about the masks that we wear, the false self. That's the stranger. And so anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there, but I see a lot of other hands up. I saw Michael first, then Macintosh, then Mario, then Jerry. So let's go in that order, if you don't mind.
It's actually, I put it in the order there. It's Michael, Mario, Jerry, and then Macintosh.
There you go.
All right. Hey, how's everyone doing? Really appreciated this presentation and love the mustache. So yeah, this resonates with me. And, the whole mirror thing you just said, I mean, really, it's so true because, I find myself, people that bother me, it's usually because I see qualities that I don't like of myself within them, like, and it's just like, that's something that I'm aware of, but with contemplative meditation and whatnot, that's something I've been, practicing since I was 16. I'm 26 now. I noticed with like the thinking, we all have different ways. My mind kind of runs a little crazy when I think. I tend to overthink, and I just wonder, where do you draw the line of like being productive with your thoughts, but also where do you, when you get carried away, where do you draw the line? And do you have an objective, like when you're meditation? Do you think this is the topic and you're kind of building off? Because otherwise, I find it being like the monkey mind for me.
I know exactly what you're thinking, and the monkey mind, believe it or not, is a great thing. In meditation, it's okay to wander. It's okay to go off in tangents. You don't have to focus on one thing, because that may be the true self. That may be your inner self trying to tell you, hey, your focus needs to be over here. And that's fine. Just go wherever it leads you. In fact, the word temple comes from the word templum, the Latin word templum. And the templum was a section of the night sky. So the ancients would pick out one section of the night sky and observe it night after night after night. And they would look for changes in the constellations. They would look for whether it be a shooting star or something passes through that area. But that was the templum. That was their focus. And so it really was about observing those changes and then deriving some meaning out of that. And I think it's really fitting that the word temple, being a sacred space, is derived from that, because ancient man saw that night sky, that space, as a sacred space. So, again, Michael, to your point, what you were saying is, it is natural for stray thoughts to wander in, or for our minds to go off in tangents when we're in a period of contemplation or meditation. And that's fine. I say go with those stray thoughts, because they're probably guiding you where you need to go. So don't try to rein them in too much.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Mario.
Yes, sir. Peace to the brothers. I'm going to make it as brief as possible. To answer the brother previously, our minds is something that we have to learn to control. Everything that enters our mind has to be assessed, but it does not have to be accepted. And I think there was an analogy someone used. Would you let your child run around the house with scissors in their hand? And if you wouldn't do that, then why would you let your thoughts run the same? And so one word for certain jurisdictions, but that comes across for us as Masons, is the word of brother cautious. When we're coming out of darkness seeking light, we should be more patient and more cautious with those that we know that are in darkness, because we're familiar with darkness. It is a place that we're coming from, and darkness only means the unknown. And we only move when there's a spark of light that let us know that this path is safe. And so as we move as Masons, we should always bear the light so that we can bring somebody else out of darkness. But that means that we should walk the earth in meekness, because we understand what darkness feels like. And that's where the apron comes in, to say that I'm no better. If this apron is moved up, then I am also naked as well. And so we should be more humble and more cautious as we move about, showing our moral character, so that men also may seek the light and we may be able to bestow their light upon them. But that's all that I wanted to share. Great presentation, brother, and thank you all for allowing those at large to be on.
It was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. I love that. And that reminds me of actually something that happened earlier this evening. I was having a little bit of an issue with my bank. And I get on the phone with customer service. And the young man that I was mentioning that lived with me I was in the car, I had him on Bluetooth, and he's sitting next to me, and I'm describing to the person at the bank my issue and what I would like to see to resolve that issue. And basically the answer was, well, that can't be done. That can't be done. That can't be done. I said, yeah, I'm sure it can be done. It can be done. She gets her supervisor on the phone. And I wasn't well, what do you call it, Karen? I didn't say, hey, let me speak to your supervisor. Nothing like that. I just said, look, it can be done. And actually, she arrived at that conclusion. Hey, I need to get my supervisor. And she said, hang on, I'm gonna get my supervisor on the line. Let's see what we can do. At no time did I blast her or tell her she was wrong or incompetent or really criticize her. What I said to her was, there's always a plan B. There is always a plan B. Her supervisor gets on the phone. I explained the situation to him. And he told me the same thing the representative told me. And I was just very patient. I said, and I actually, these are my words. I said, I hear what you're saying. It's important to always acknowledge what the other person says. It's important to acknowledge that so they feel like they're being heard. Because if they feel like they're being heard, they're going to be more receptive to what you have to say. So it was important for me to say, I hear what you're saying, but there's always a plan B. The supervisor didn't have the answer. He said, well, maybe this other department can help you. Transfers me to another department. Yeah, that's the way it is with these big banks. You're going to be transferred to 5 or 6 people before you actually get to somebody who knows what they're talking about. But each and every person I spoke to, I just always said, look, I hear what you're saying, but there's always a plan B. And I finally got to a representative who had plan B and resolved my problem. Yeah, it took 45 minutes to get there. And I could have lost my cool. I could have just like chewed that person out because I knew I was right. I knew there was a way to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. Now, I could have been a jerk about it, but I didn't. I treated each person with respect. Let them know, acknowledge that I heard what they were saying. In fact, one young lady kept repeating herself over and over, and I said, dear, listen, I hear what you're saying, but you don't have to repeat yourself. I heard you the first time, but there's always a plan B. And sure enough, got to the right person who said, yeah, here's your plan B. Boom, perfect. That's the solution I wanted. Just, it's about acknowledging other people. Don't treat other people rude or condescending. That's very hard to do. We have a tendency to do that, whether we realize it or not, to be condescending to people. Condescending means talking down people, by the way. But yeah, we have a tendency to do that without even being aware of it. But part of controlling the ego is being more aware of how we interact with the world around us. So anyway, I know that was a long story off on tangent. I apologize, but were there?
Jerry was next.
Yeah.
If I could, brothers, I wanted to add to what the beloved said, and please excuse me for cutting your wisdom. Remember that the canopy of heaven is not within the lodge, but it is within the universe. And within the lodge, we make right angles. Well, if you correlate that over into the real world, we have to approach problems from the right angles of those problems. That's all that I have.
Very good. Cool. So I think Jerry Kopp had the next question.
Yes, it's quite interesting on what you have to say about the Perfect Ashlar. And I remember I was a Grand Secretary for the Grand Lodge of Alberta for quite a number of years. And my interpretation of the transition between the rough and the perfect ashlar, I related that to my my Grand Master, and he kind of looked at me and said, "What are you smoking?" But
Well, it is legal in Canada, so I mean, honestly,
Oh, in some states in America too.
that's true.
the thing is that there has, in my experience and listening to some of the brethren, that the rough ashlar kind of gets a bad reputation. But what they don't realize is that the rough ashlar eventually, it doesn't matter whether you use the working tools or it's a self-improvement, will become a perfect ashlar. And as you indicated that you have several ashlars, perfect ashlars, and not necessarily all ashlars will become that perfect. They'll only become perfect to the point where you lay down your working tools. And so your ashlar and my ashlar, when we go to lay down our working tools, may look differently. And it's and if you can keep that in your mind, that the transition from the rough ashlar to the perfect ashlar is life itself, birth, life, and death, and then reincarnation or rebirth. So I thought I'd mention that, and I want to compliment you on an excellent paper. I sincerely enjoyed it, and it's something that if it's on YouTube, I'll certainly look it up and hopefully be able to share it. And I thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and Brother Jerry, I believe we have sat in Zetlin 83 together, have we not?
Yes,
But
we have.
for the virtual,
Yes.
not in person, but yes, yeah, I thought we have a number of times. Yes,
Yeah.
So good to see you here.
Yeah, nice to see you. I'm retired as a Grand Secretary, but I hired on 5 years ago as a Grand Scribee and retired as a Grand Recorder for Cryptic Rites. So,
Wow, you're just a glutton for punishment.
that's what they say.
It is so good to see you, brother.
Nice to see you.
Byron,
Okay, what I like to do, I tell people the difference between boys and men. Boys come up with excuses to get out of doing what they need to do. Men figure out how to do what they need to do. And we don't have enough men that want to go to the trouble to figure out how to do what they need to do. Because I like what Matthew said about there's always a plan B. If you have the patience and the right attitude, eventually you find somebody that can find out how to do what you need to do. That's the thing I have a bone to pick with. Freemasonry make men better. In my experience, Freemasonry don't make men better. Men's desire to become better,
Right on.
what makes them better.
Yes. Right on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Brother Byron, I will just say that the tagline that we use, Masonry, is makes good men better. I am not a fan of that at all. I don't know who came up with that, but it's almost like a cheesy marketing thing. You're absolutely right. The only one who can make you better is you. Masonry gives you the tools. It gives you the working tools, but it's up to you. It's up to each and every one of us to actually put the tools to use and make ourselves better. So Byron, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly right.
I think that's because my road to becoming better started before I got in Freemasonry. What Freemasonry did was give me some guidelines how to continue down that road.
Right
Yeah.
on.
Where were you first made an entered apprentice?
Yep.
Right.
In my heart.
You know,
Yeah.
I will respectfully disagree with you all. I do agree that masonry provides the format, and I do agree that the more you are interested, the more of a turbocharge you give yourself. But you can't avoid it. If you sit down and break bread with people that you would never normally be around, and you allow them to have any kind of interaction with you. I had an entered apprentice who never went any further. He came up and asked me, is there anything I can get from Freemasonry that I can't get on my own? And the truth of the matter is that we could all go sit on that mountaintop or in that field, and we could go through that long process of figuring out how to look at things from different perspectives. But it would take so much longer and so much more insight. And to be honest with you, we're checkered enough, most of us, or at least in my experience, it's been, where that little boost from others really, really, really helps. But you can't avoid having a positive influence on your life when you're in the company of people like are on this call. And I understand where you're coming from. It's trite, it's cheesy, it's a lot of things. But if you go and break bread with a group of people who have different perspectives, can you really avoid growing at least that little bit?
I agree. What you just described, is anyone here familiar with the word egregore? It's actually a French word, and it's really not an English correlation to it. But egregore is basically a group energy. We've all been into a lodge where we just felt the energy in the room. It was just perfect. We did not want that night to end. It was right. It was just right. All of the brothers were in harmony with each other. They were all in one accord. It was beautiful. Or you've experienced that in a festive board or something of that nature. That group energy that you feel, that's the French word egregore. And I think companion Sir Knight Stephen, that's exactly what we are referring to there. We can't help but be better men based off of that experience and that interaction with our brothers. It really does feed into who we are. Again, I maintain that masonry doesn't make good men better. Masonry provides the tools to make good men better. And that's the only amendment I would make to that little catchphrase. It provides the tools, because the reason why I say that is we all know men who are Masons. They walk around with dues cards, but they've never gotten really much out of it, if anything at all. They might be the ones who are what I like to call apron chasers. They're always looking for extra dues cards and feathers in their hat, to show how prestigious they are. And
I call them title chasers.
Yeah,
That's
same
correct.
thing. Exactly, same thing. And that's the ego running them up. Like, hey, look at you. You're 33rd degree, Scottish Rite Mason. Great. Look at that. The ego, or chasing. And I'm not saying that about 33, because every single 33rd degree I know, with the exception of maybe two, but most of the 33rd degrees I know are very humble. They consider themselves Master Masons first. It's not an ego thing. It's not a big deal to them. Yeah, it's a nice honor, but it's not who they are. It doesn't consume them. That to me, speaks volumes about the character of that man. So we all know people who, brothers who are in the fraternity, probably for the wrong reasons.
Okay, so
Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it doesn't mean they're not good men. They are good men. But are they doing anything to better themselves? In a lot of cases, in some of those cases, the answer is no. They're not really doing anything to better themselves. They are just here. And that's the reason why I use the word, Master Masons in quotation marks, because, I tend to refer to these guys as members, not really Masons. And there are brothers, so I got to tell you a little thing about myself. Men where I just sense this huge ego pouring off of them, or this false, inflated self-importance, and this is who I am, and look at all the things I'm a member of, and things like that. I read my Masonic bio for the first time, maybe about a month ago. Somebody else wrote it for me. And I read the bio, I thought, oh my God, I hate myself, because it was just so pompous and arrogant. And I'm a member of this, I'm a member of that. And all of it's true. But I was actually embarrassed by that, because I don't want somebody reading that entire Masonic bio, because it sounds like I'm just so full of, it almost sounds like I'm one of those title chasers or apron chasers. And, I could care less about that. But I think we all know brothers. And I'm not saying that's the majority or anything like that. I'll just say we all know those brothers that applies to, that, they have failed to learn anything from our degrees. They are just here for the titles.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say that we've got two people who are waiting to speak. Let's give them a quick opportunity to speak, and then we don't have to close the meeting down, but we do have to, I do want one other person to speak before more people leave. So I believe McIntosh is first. Is that correct, Danny?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, McIntosh, please.
Yeah, I'm back again. So Brother Carl Young said something that I found to be interesting. He said, I must have a dark self also if I am to be whole. The other thing he talks about a lot is the shadow self. How does one harmonize within himself the dark and light side, if you will? How do you bring balance to that reality?
That's a great question. And that reminds me of the checkered pavement of the lodge, right? The black and white pavement. That's another example of those extremes. So a lot of people would tell you that you should try to repel that dark side of yourself. You should try to push that away. You should try to purge yourself of that. I take the exact opposite approach. I really do. Embrace the dark side of yourself. Welcome that dark side.
Yeah, it seems pretty scary, depending on the culture or the tradition. Embracing it just seems scary, because we've been taught, well, at least in my culture, certain things are right or wrong, and you working through it. But to embrace the dark side seems almost scary. Now, I know what's in your mind is not morally wrong. It's acting on whatever it is. So it just seems scary to like, for example, in my Protestant point of view, growing up as a Seventh-day Adventist, I was taught not to eat pork. Pork is unclean. The Baptist or the Catholic or whoever can eat pork, and they don't have an issue with it. Now I eat pork, but it took a process of me coming to realize that, well, pork isn't like something that's going to lead you to hell. You know, so how, like, I struggle with that whole idea of embracing your dark side, but in order to be whole, you must accept it and coming to grips with your shadow side. It just, that's a hard work on my trestle board right now. I'm not sure how to really work that trestle board with designing.
It is hard. It is hard. I mean, our instinct and what we're told is that we are to try to rid ourselves of that dark side or anything that, you know, is unpleasant or parts of ourselves that are really unfavorable. And I think, again, you know, that checkered pavement of the lodge floor, it represents the two extremes. You can't have night without day. You can't have hot without cold. Good, bad, right, wrong. You know, there are all these extremes there. But I think you have to, that dark side of ourselves, that dark side of human nature, that's the part that we want to distance ourselves from. But the reason why I say that I think we should embrace that side of ourselves is because if we try to push that side of ourselves away, we're not going to have the opportunity to understand that side of ourselves. I say embrace it. I'm not saying go out there and go all, you know, Aleister Crowley or you know, whatever. I mean, I'm just saying embrace it. Understand that, hey, this is part of my human nature. It's probably part of the false self. It's probably a mask that we wear. But understand it. So don't try to just push it away or dismiss it without acknowledging it and trying to understand where it's coming from, because that may lead you to a deeper truth.
Hey, Matt, have you ever heard of the story of the two wolves, the black wolf and the white wolf?
I have. It's been a while, but yes.
This actually brought me back to that. Which one are you going to feed?
I'd say both. Because the one you don't feed is the one that's going to attack you, honestly.
Ooh, that's an interesting perspective. I've never heard that. Okay. Okay. Fair
Yeah, if you
enough.
starve one of them, it's going to attack you. It's just a matter of time.
It's hungry and it needs to survive.
Wait, there's a Duran Duran song in there somewhere.
Hungry like the wolf.
Yeah.
Hungry like the wolf.
And the
Okay.
pendulum has to swing both directions, no matter what you do.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Jerry. Jerry.
My Cheese is another book that you could read, same application. But, you know, we speak of Freemasonry taking good men and making them better. Not that I totally agree with that. But what I do see is the tools that we have been given to make ourselves to be better people. And by making ourselves better people, we walk about emulating a certain characteristic, a characteristic of what a Freemason should be. And that emulation, that when we walk the streets, people will wonder, why is it that this individual is the way he is? And yes, there could be non-Masons out there doing the same thing. But if someone researches Jerry Kopp, for instance, they'll find out, oh my God, he's a Freemason. Now, what makes him different from everybody else? And I think that's the beauty of our craft, our gentle craft, is the portrayal of a good person, a person that our Creator wants us to be. Thank you.
Yep. How many of us have actually had good men want to join the craft, want to learn more about masonry because they saw something in us that they wanted? That's happened to me a number of times, but most recently there was a gentleman that contacted me and said, "Hey, I used to work with this guy who told me I should contact you because the other gentleman lives in another state." But he said, I worked with him. He's a great guy and he's a Mason and I want to be like him. What do I need to do to become a Mason? And it was this brother living his Masonry. That's the only way I can put it. He was living his Masonry. And we've all seen good men who've never really given Masonry a thought, but then they looked at us and saw how we lead our lives and how we treat other people. And they want a part of that. And so they asked the question, how can I become a Mason?
Did you have a follow-up, Jerry, or did you?
No, I'm good. As a matter of fact, one of the points that maybe I should make is I have a daughter that could be a Freemason because she displays all the characteristics. She's just such a kind person. And like you, Matthew, you've taken somebody in. My daughter has done that at the age of 14, 15. A girl that was without money and heading across Canada back to Quebec. And my daughter happened to work at a service station and intercepted her and brought her to our home for 4 or 5 days and then sent her on her way with $100 and some to get home. That to me says a lot about a person, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a man. It can be a lady too. So, but that's the beauty of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Mario, go ahead.
All right, yes, sir. Again, brothers, when we look at the craft that we're a part of, any man that has reached a level of knowledge to be classified as light, he has to study the darkness in which he's coming out of, because that darkness is what connects him to other people. The state of unknown. Darkness, again, is only classified as that which is unknown. It doesn't mean satanic. It doesn't mean sadistic. It only means lack of knowledge when we become Masons, right? Because we have a deeper understanding of it. So for the brother that spoke about the reverence of pork and the eating or the dismissal of eating of it, well, there's a moral understanding of it to the moral dangers of eating it. But more importantly, what I wanted to just state is there's an esoteric, this word esoteric is embodied in the knowledge of Freemasonry. Esoteric means the hidden meaning of. Now, when you study Freemasonry, whatever your intention is what will be fed. If you're looking for something to buy your time because you don't want to be at home with your wife all day, it will give you that. If you're looking for deeper meanings of life and philosophy, if that is your initial interest, it will give you that. So those of us as Masons, as we explore it, there is a hidden meaning in Freemasonry that we have to explore, which means that there's something beyond the common eye, which has to reach to the intellect, the eye of the intellect of a man. And so again, it goes back to that word that I stated earlier, cautious. We ought to be cautious the way that we see things. We ought to be cautious of the way that we interpret things. and we ought to be cautious the way of people interpret things. So when we say that we seek to make good men better, it's true in a sense, but when a man is in darkness, he don't know what's good or bad for himself until he reaches a man of light. And that's why it goes back to the moral compass of us. When we accept these teachings, we take the responsibility of going out into the world and being a light unto the darkness. Peace.
Absolutely. Well said. Absolutely.
Byron.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I started on the dark side before I got in Freemasonry. Last year I had a young brother, get confused. My grandmaster told him this: you better leave Byron alone. If he goes 39th Street on your ass, they will not find the body. Because my grandmaster knew where I came up and knew where I grew up. And I'm a Marine. Just because I'm a nice guy now doesn't mean I was always a nice guy. And you don't forget your past and how to do it. You know, we get confused. Some people get confused, think that you can take advantage of nice guys. But there's a lot of nice guys out there. You don't want to make them go retro.
Come and teach middle school. We need you.
You know, well, as Byron, like Matthew said about his Masonic memberships, mine are off the chain, and I don't use them. I had a brother, my first grand officer, asked me, what I call you now? I said, what'd you call me yesterday? He said, Hambone. I'm still Hambone. I'm only gonna be Grand High Priest for a minute, but I'm gonna be Hambone my whole life. And I've always tried to be me, irregardless of whatever title I had.
Thanks, Byron.
Thanks, Byron. Okay, is there a William Bill Snyder in the house?
There is.
Would you like to say a few words?
Just that was quite a discussion. This is why we're doing these educational events. This was very enlightening, I think, just to the participants, but also to anyone that takes the opportunity to review this at a later time. I'm very pleased with the interaction, very pleased with the Masonic energy that's been generated from this. Our group was not extremely large, but it was not small either. And I appreciate everyone sticking with it. And I think there'll be more to come from this. And I thank Matthew for that and the others. I got a lot of guidance from this. A lot of help, a lot of things that I've learned suddenly made sense, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.